Hello, my name is Jarrett and I'm a horticultural consultant, and I also teach, and this is on one of our programs on how to plant a tree. And I have noticed that many people do not know how to plant a tree correctly. So we're going to do this tree, which is a new one to my garden, a new addition, and it's a Stewartia. And it's a very pretty tree with a nice peeling bark as it matures, white flowers in the summer, are then followed by these little fruit things. I don't know if you can see them, but anyway, it's a cute little tree. So we're going to put it in here because we took a tree down and we've still got the stump in there, but it will rot by itself, so no problem there. So first of all, what we're going to do is make sure that the tree is at the right height and also the right width. Now, if we look at this tree right now, we can put it in the hole to see if it is deep enough and if the hole is wide enough. And the wider the hole, the better, but the actual depth of the hole should be the depth of the root ball. And if you look at this, this is a ball and burlap, also called referred to as B&B, and this is a common form the way trees are in the nursery. So this ball and burlap, a lot of people say that it's good to keep it on because then the root ball stays intact, but we have proven with numerous studies that this is not the case, and the roots actually are girdled by this and have a hard time getting through the burlap, even though this looks quite deteriorated. But especially around the neck of the tree, the flare of the tree, where that's all wrapped there with burlap, it's all many layers, that will take a long time to decompose. And if we're living in the jungle, it might take not too long, but since we're living in British Columbia, it will take a while. So we're going to remove this as much as we can and make sure it's at the right depth. Okay, so here we are. Okay, so here we are with the plant in the hole, the tree in the hole. And first off, before we do anything, I'm going to remove any ties that we have on it. For one thing, they're getting in my way. And you don't want to keep any ties on the tree because what will happen is that it will restrict the growth. And the next thing you know, you've got girdled stems. And this is why you take all the string off the root ball as well, off the ball and burlap. So if you look at this, we've actually got this propped in here. It's a little tight due to the fact the other tree, but there's no way we're going to get that tree stump out, not a chance. So anyway, if you look down here, you'll see that it looks like it's a little high, but it's not really, because this is a good way to determine the height of the root ball in a hole. Just lay your shovel down with the handle, and then you can actually see where it sits in the hole. So it looks a little high, but we're going to be putting mulch around here as well. So that's going to be fine. And we want it so the root flare is above the grade of the soil, the final grade of the soil. So it's important that it should be a little higher rather than a little lower. If it's too low, what will happen is adventitious roots will form on the stem, on the bottom of this trunk, and will wrap themselves around underneath the soil because it's buried. And then that will actually strangle the tree. So we don't want that. So we're going to plant it just so you can see the top of the root flare, which is exactly where plants like to be planted, especially trees. So we're going to be taking off this the string from the burlap as far as we can. So I'll take the shovel out of the way. I'd like to go a little wider, but running out of space here. So, and the soil is very, very friable here. It's very loose. It's a garden that's being well maintained, so there's no problem with soil compaction or anything like that. So I'm just going to get some knife or scissors and take this out. Okay. All right. So here we are with the root ball in the hole. We're going to take the weeds off, which of course you need to do. And then we're going to take off this string as far as we can. And one of the things that the nurseries and growers say to the landscapers is that, you know, don't disturb that root ball, don't take the burlap off, because if you do, then the integrity of the root ball will be compromised. In other words, the soil will fall off all the roots. Well, that's not necessarily true, especially if you're careful about it. So when you take up all the string, that shouldn't make it all disappear and go into nothing. It should actually help it. So it does, they put a lot of string on, but it's just to keep the root ball intact until you put it in the hole. Get it all out of the way. And then remove this burlap as much as you can. Now, as you can see, the soil is clay. And the reason why they put it in clay, they grow plants in ball and burlap in clay. If you notice when you buy a plant in a pot, it's never in clay. It's only in ball and burlap they do that. And the reason why they do that is so it actually keeps the root ball intact. And there's nothing wrong with that, but as you can see, I'm just pulling this burlap away. It's been in the nursery for some time. And that's really what you do. Now, if it doesn't come away easily, then you cut it off. But as you can see, the root ball is nicely intact. There's no problems with it. Now, what I want to do here to just rough out the top a little bit. Let those roots know that there's surrounding ground around there. Loosen them up. They've been confined, I don't know how many years this has been in that burlap bag, but quite some time, I would say. Now, another thing you can do is make sure you've got the root flare exposed. Now, this is being planted a little too deeply, which is fairly common practice when you're cutting up and ball and burlapping lots of plants. It's a really easy thing to do, to have them planted too deeply, because you can't be persnickety with each one. But as you can see, I'm trying to get rid of this extra soil. To get the root flare down. Now, I have planted trees deeper than they should be, deeper than the root flare, and they've not liked it. And it doesn't, the trees don't show their displeasure straight away. Usually what they do is they slowly decline over time, and then you don't really know why they're declining. And so they'll get insects, diseases, and you won't know why. And so this is an important step to make sure that you got the root flare, the trunk flare I should say, right in the right place. And there it is right there. You can see it. Now, I'm cutting these fibrous roots. Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. They've got lots more. And it will actually make them grow more. But as you can see now, here's the root flare. So it was planted a couple of inches too deep. So it's a good job we didn't make a big, huge hole. Now notice we didn't dig really far down. If we'd have done a really big, deep hole, they would have had to put more soil in at the bottom to make sure that this was at the right depth. And then what would have happened would be that the tree will eventually settle. And when it settles, that means that it's now going to be too deep. Okay, so that's perfect. And as you can see, if we get our shovel again, it will be just about the right depth. So that's perfect. So I'm very happy about that. Right, so next thing we do, I can add a few things now. In my day, when I was in college, I don't want to tell you how long ago that was, but we did know that you shouldn't really add things to the soil, especially like humus and the really good stuff, compost, because what happens is the roots stay in that area and they don't spread out. So now, instead of putting all that nice stuff in that I used to do, and in a way I'm glad I don't have to do that anymore because it took a lot of time, is now we use other things like bone meal and mycorrhizal fungi. Now, if I get up with my bad knees, I will show you what they are. So, this is mycorrhizal fungi, and this is a beneficial fungus that forms on all plants except for heather. And this is a fungus that we put into the soil around the tree, and you follow the instructions. And this fungus works symbiotically with the tree, because the fungus provides attaches it onto the roots of the tree and goes far and wide, getting more nutrients, getting more water to the roots. So it's really beneficial. And what does the fungus get? The fungus gets carbohydrates from the plant, and of course that is really beneficial for the fungus because only plants manufacture carbohydrates. So, and fungus is not a plant, so it works out. It's a win-win situation. So it's a good thing to do. Now there's all different kinds of ones. This is for trees and shrubs. This is others for perennials. One's for lawns. Now another thing is bone meal. Now I used to put these both in together, and I found out through research that that's not a good idea. So either do one or the other. Don't do both, because the mycorrhizal fungi doesn't like this bone meal. So either do one or the other. And okay, so then what we do is we backfill. We don't put any fancy amendments to the soil. We just put the soil in around the root ball. So here we are. We've backfilled this hole, and I'm also, along the way, I have been pushing down, making sure that it's firmly in there. No air pockets. You don't want any air pockets. Oftentimes what people do is that they're too gentle. They put a tree in, and they just lightly put the soil around, and they don't want to hurt the roots, and they don't want to destroy the root ball. So they're very, very gentle. But what happens is you get air pockets between the roots and the soil. That's a killer for sure. So let's not do that. Make sure it's all intact. The soil and the roots are together. Another thing is, a lot of people don't realize this, but there's a front and a back for every plant. And so make sure you get two people when you're planting this. One to say, okay, move it to the left, move it to the right, 60 degrees, you know, because there's nothing worse than having the plant facing the wrong way. And the reason why they face a certain way is because it's usually where they are in a nursery and where the sun is and all that kind of stuff. So they do have a front and a back. So make sure you have the front and the back in the right place. And I have done that with this. So anyway, now we're happy with where this tree is, and so now we're going to put the mulch in. Now when you put mulch down, I could water it first, and you know, and people will often say, well, the soil is wet, I don't need to water it, or it's raining, or I've got an irrigation system, I don't need to water it. Actually, you do have to water it. You have to hand water it gently, and enough so that the water actually sinks through. And you see, it's not that you're just making the soil wet. That's not really all it's all about. The other thing is to fill in all those air pockets. Make sure all that soil sits snugly against the roots, and then you'll definitely have a happy plant. So maybe what we'll do is we'll water this first, and then what we'll do is we'll put the mulch down. Now when you do put the mulch down, make sure you don't put it against the trunk of the tree. And we've got some mulch that was here before, so we'll just replace it, and so it won't be too fancy. But I'm going to have to remulch this bed anyway in a few weeks when I get some time, so we'll do that then. But in the meantime, we'll give this a drink, okay? And another thing I should mention is that you can use starter fertilizer, and this starter fertilizer actually helps the roots work into the soil. It's got a hormone in there, and it actually is a good idea to use it. So we'll probably give it a drink of water, and then we'll give it some of this in from a watering can. All right, so I'll be back in a second with a hose. All right. All right, so here we are. Nice gentle spray. This is what I noticed. I need a new walkway in my garden. Let's not talk about that. That's another one. Putting in a walkway. So make sure that it's, a lot of times when people water, they either make it sodden or they make it just a little bit. But no, you have to puddle, and don't forget to get the whole area, especially if it's dry. Now, we're doing this in September. September is perfect time to plant trees, more so than in spring, because in spring you have the hot summer on the way, but in fall, and the leaves are just starting to turn now, what happens is the soil is warm. The soil is warm, and the air is cool. The days are short, and with the onset of winter in British Columbia, we'll get lots of rain, and it's the perfect time for roots to grow into the soil. So fall planting actually is the best time to plant your tree, especially trees. Roses also like to be planted in the fall, but I like fall planting on so many levels because the roots establish themselves in the surrounding soil. So by the time spring comes, they're ready to go, and they're way ahead of the game than the plants that you just planted in the spring. Planting in summer is not a great idea. I know when you read reference material and stuff, they say, well, if it's in a pot, if it's a container grown plant, then it's fine. But boy, you have to be watering that. You have to be there. You can't go on vacation when you've got a new plant in, or especially if you're doing a new garden. So if you're going to do that, try and do it in the fall. Also, there's plant sales on, which is nice, but oftentimes you don't get the pick of the crop because a lot of the things that you want have gone because they were all sold in the spring. So all in all, I would say that fall planting is the best. I do like to plant. We were going to plant this in spring, but then the spring got away with me. You're going to do it early spring, March, April. Don't do it any later than that, because if you do that, it's going to get into summer and it's going to be too hot and dry. Okay, so the next thing and the last thing, well, the next to last thing, is to put some of this starter fertilizer in. There's all different kinds. I'm not picking to each one. It's whenever I find, and then just pour the amount as directed in the instructions, and let that water sit for a while there, you know, and then you can put in this. Now, if you do this first and then water it, you're going to leach it all out, so that's not good. So do it after you've watered. This will just give it a little extra zip. So make sure you puddle it. Notice that the soil is not eroding away. It's all staying in one spot. Don't plant on hills, because then the water just rivulets off, taking all the soil with it, which I find extremely annoying. So make sure that you don't have any erosion going on. If you do, then change your lay of the land there. Okay, so after that, we'll put in the mulch, and we'll put that around there, and it looks like it'll be there forever. It's been there forever, and it'll be lovely. And our lovely Stewartia. Okay, so here we are. We just put the mulch down here. Make sure you move it away from the trunk of the tree so it doesn't rot. Spread it out nicely. Now, the depth of the mulch should be about, I would say about 2 to 3 inches. You can do it more if you like. Usually mulch is expensive these days. So, and mulch is like a woody substance, leaves, any organic kind of matter. Cedar's not a good one to use because it will delay rotting, and so it will not rot, and the insects won't like it because it's got stuff in it that repels insects. So that's not a great idea, because you want insects around there to help the soil ecology. Let's see, another thing is when you select a tree, make sure it doesn't have a double leader. And I just thought of this as I was looking at this guy, because it does not. So that's called Codominant Stems. So it's got one straight stem going all the way up, and which means it will have a nice branching habit. If you have two stems that are joined like this, what will happen is eventually time will kind of pull them apart. Water will go in between the two stems and start rotting, and then also with the weight of the limbs on the trees, it will eventually split. So don't get a tree with a forked top stems, which is codominant leaders. That's not a good idea. Another thing is, in my day in college, we used to cut everything by a third. We don't do that anymore. We now know, no, don't do that. So leave the tree as it is, keep as much stuff on the tree as you can. Even maybe the little one down here, you can take that off. But other than that, leave the tree as is. If the tree's flowering, try not to plant a tree when it's flowering or fruiting. I know that's difficult, especially with a fruit tree, but try not to. Because it's trying to use all its energy to produce flowers, to produce fruit. It's going to be sidetracked and won't be wanting to grow roots, right? So let it just do one thing at a time. And I think that's it for now, and we'll see how this bad boy grows in the future. And thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed the lecture of planting a tree in a Madness garden. Thank you.